Kaytlyn Gerbin, welcome back to the podcast. So fun to see you.
Yeah, good to see you too, Dylan.
How have things been recently for you? I just got off the phone with Ryan and I told him, oh, I'm about to pod with Kaytlyn. He said, oh, she just did a sweet classic large season route here in Washington.
I did. Yeah, yesterday we gambled a little bit. We've had a lot of wildfire smoke in the Northwest. Actually, the last couple of weeks, really since I got back from Europe, there've been wildfires and a lot of smoke in Seattle and Issaquah area. But we got lucky with the smoke and got a pocket of good air and went and did one of these routes that I've done probably like 4 or 5 times now over the years that we've been in the Northwest. And it's just like one of those routes that every time I go back, I'm like, oh yeah, I know why I'm going back to this route. That was super fun. And I actually had the first time I did it was backpacking with probably like a, 40 or 50 liter pack with a bunch of friends. Then I've done it like in a lightweight overnight style with Ellie a couple of years later. Then I've gone back and like run it a handful of times in a day. So it's just, it's one of those routes I feel like I've experienced kind of every version of different ways to travel on it, which makes it kind of fun.
And is it peak larch season right now? I experienced larches for the first time myself, like a complete tourist when I did the enchantments this time last year.
Yep.
And of course there was like a billion people on the route, but it didn't make it any less spectacular. Maybe explain to the audience the majesty of larch season in the Northwest.
Yeah, I mean it's a full-on obsession for people. I think like trying to get out and see when all the colors are turning. And so the larches, I think I think it depends on the region. It seems like we're like just past peak, maybe at least where I was yesterday. But it's just amazing to see like the bright yellow trees, especially then with like the red huckleberry, bushes kind of on the ground. And it just makes for really spectacular times. So amazing that we're at, mid-October and still have like summer type weather, super dry, but it's fortunately starting to rain, I think, by the end of this weekend. So hopefully the wildfires will be calmed down a little bit by that rain.
Yeah, I was just saying to Ryan that I saw on Twitter yesterday that it was 88 degrees in Seattle yesterday, and that set a record for the second half of October by like 14 degrees Fahrenheit for,
it's crazy. It's crazy. And I think, it's of course, like we love good sunny weather and we get it, but also then when you tamper that with like how dry and smoky it's been, I think like I'm really ready for fall. And part of that is just like, like after like this time of year, I feel like always it's kind of like nice that when the weather starts to turn, it gets a little colder, a little darker and rainier. It's like a really good equalizer to just be like, I think I'm going to just like stay inside today and like not go do an 8-hour adventure in the mountains. So, I don't want to complain about having good weather here, but I think, nice to get in a few more adventures before the weather turns, but I'll be ready for the rain when that comes too.
Yeah, the rain will be welcomed, and then come May next year, you're going to be like, where the hell is the damn sunshine? Anyway, well, good to catch up briefly. I feel like we have a ton to talk about. I want to hear all about the North Cascades High Route adventure you did in July. Obviously, I want to talk all about your third place finish at UTMB. I want to hear about crewing at Tour de France for the second time. And then, of course, it was just announced that you are going to be on the 80K team for Team USA at the World Mountain Running Championships in Thailand coming up here at the end of the year. So I feel like we have a ton to talk about. But first, the last time you were on the show was a while ago now. It was like 2 years ago.
Back in the Pillars days.
It's like whatever, 3 names ago. But you are a good friend, and I'm really excited to have you back on the show. And I feel like it's probably good to just kind of catch people up on where you've been since the last time we've talked, because it's been fairly action packed. And I feel like, when we recorded that conversation, I didn't go back and revisit it, but I recall, I think it was not long after you'd broken the FKT on the Wonderland Trail. Earlier that year, you'd won Trans Gran Canaria and the Coastal Challenge, and you'd really like sort of announced yourself to the international trail running world as being like, one of the best, and certainly somebody who is going to be a household name for a decade to come. And then you were sidelined with what I understand to be a fairly scary stress fracture. So maybe just catch people up on what happened there and how you've been able to build back. More importantly, how you've been able to build back towards, landing on the podium at UTMB and being in world-class form again.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that was, I was on the pod in 2020. So that was obviously like the start of the pandemic, but I had, like you mentioned, snuck in like 2 big international wins right before everything shut down in the spring. And then did the Wonderland Trail in the summer, and that was amazing. And then I think probably like a lot of people, like I was kind of just in this a little bit of like standstill with like, we don't really know what races are going to be happening. We don't really know, what's going to happen with the pandemic. Like, are we going to be allowed to travel again? And so I didn't really have a plan for 2021. And I think, had a lot of actually really big life stresses happening at that time. We sold a house, bought a house, did a bunch of renovations. I had, at the time with my job, I think 2 huge publications that I was working on wrapping up, also trying to train and run. And I was on the North Face team and, had kind of some big ambitions for that year, but I guess didn't really, like, I think looking back, like probably didn't take like the recovery and downtime that I really needed, because I just was like, well, kind of just cruising along here. And so I, all those things aside, I ended up finding myself with like my first real running injury, which was like, lo and behold, like a massive injury. I had
seriously scary one.
Yeah, I had a stress fracture in the neck of my femur. And so that's, a high risk area, because if the fracture continues to break through, like it doesn't heal well there, and also can be really scary and like a career ending injury. That's what I remember my doctor telling me. So that happened in April of 2021, and that took me out for like the entire summer. So definitely not easy to deal with an injury. And I think it took a while for me to wrap my head around like actually being injured, because I think I had been fortunate to really not have a lot of injuries or really any major injury from running throughout my whole running career. So then to like go and have that happen, I felt like it was just like, whoa, this is serious. That was a big thing. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I took my time coming out of that, really like leaned into some other things, took time off from running. I think it was actually a really good thing. I mean, it like sucked in the moment. I don't want to say like that injury is like, now rosy cheeks looking back, like, wow, that was great that happened. Like it sucked, but I do think
did it feel like cruel timing to you? Because for me, it felt like just such shitty timing. Because it was like you were very much like, okay, now Kaytlyn Gerbin is in that top echelon of athletes. Yeah. And it's like, okay, now she goes and does UTMB or hard rock, or, you'd already been on the podium in Western States at that point. And so to me, it was just like, oh my goodness, like now.
I feel like it also really sucked because so much had been on hold for the pandemic that then to suddenly like to get injured right at the time when races were starting to come back online, like that felt like it really sucked, because then I felt like I missed not only the pandemic year, but also then my full year of being injured. So yeah, that sucks. But like, I mean, we never really like time when these things happen. So that's just like,
they always happen at a bad time. Yeah. It's always cruel timing.
Yeah. There's never a good time to be injured. So yeah, I don't know. I think like at the time, like when I was kind of getting through my injury and in the summer, like things were going well. And I thought for a while in there, maybe I would try to race something last fall. But, for various reasons, I had a lot of like really good people in my support network that were just reminding me too, like, why rush back to something? And actually remember, Dylan, I talked to you at some point when I was injured in there. And I remember you like giving some insight from your own injury and just like settling back and just accepting it and not trying to like train through it and cross train and do all these other things, like really just take some time off. And so I'm glad I did that, because I think, it takes a long time to build back from months off of running or even really any activity. And so I feel like I was like really just fighting that all of last fall and then even into the spring, and really like almost wondering if I was going to ever return to the same level of fitness that I had before. But it just takes time. And I think now that, you know, especially after the year and the summer that I had, and definitely after UTMB, I feel like, okay, like I've gotten back to where I was before. And maybe that's not even the right way to think about it. I feel like I'm like a new athlete now.
Yeah.
And I think like that, you know, injury aside, like regardless of what it was, like taking that time off and kind of resetting and reframing things, I think was actually a really good thing.
Yeah, the word acceptance, I think, is the most important thing. I think when any athlete is injured, that the first step is just like accepting that you're hurt. Because like for me, when I look back at my injury in 2019, I made it at least 6 months longer than it needed to be because I never accepted it. You know, it took me 6 months to accept it. So I just exacerbated the issue so much longer. So, you know, I guess curious to hear any like profound lessons that have come as a result of that. I mean, building back to the place where you are now, feeling like a new athlete. You said also that it gave you a chance to kind of focus on other things. Any sort of things that have come about from the injury that otherwise wouldn't be in your life? You know, any silver linings that now looking back on you feel grateful for?
I feel like actually the biggest thing is that I feel like being injured for as long as I was and over the summer, like really forced me to learn how to chill out. Like I'm like a pretty like I mean, I like to keep myself really busy. And I think like a good example of this is like the thought of a beach vacation before my injury was like I would just go crazy. Like I wouldn't be able to do that. But now like, I'm like, oh, like, I just feel like it's like, it helped me, I don't know, it helped me like appreciate things in a little bit of a different way and like really be able to switch that focus from like being really on when I need to be and being able to completely disengage when I don't need that. And I think that's something I had always, you know, tried to do before. And I think that especially like other things that you have going on in life, especially other jobs and stuff, really help you do that. But I think it's a skill to be able to just like turn things off. And I even found like getting ready for UTMB and like in the week leading up to the race, I felt like, oh, wow, like, I don't know, like, who am I? Like, how am I able to just like lay on the couch like this and like not stress out? Like, I don't think I would have been able to do that before, you know, having a big injury. So I guess that's kind of a silver lining, but also it's made the rest of my life pretty great too.
That's probably like the nature of the injury too, being a bone stress injury where you really have to stop. Where if it's like soft tissue, maybe you ride the bike or you do a bunch of PT or whatever. But when it's like the femoral neck, it's like, no, you got to press stop.
Yep. I think that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. All right. Well, enough about that. I mean, I think it's just good to sort of catch up about, you know, sort of where you've been in the last couple of years since the last time you were on the show. And this year has been a busy one for you. And I want to talk all about your competitive season. I want to talk about the adventures that you've done, but maybe just to make this transition seamless. You mentioned earlier about like the hardship of coming back to racing after injury, and your first race back was Trans Gran Canaria race, where you finished on the podium twice, including one victory. And I'm sure, you know, that was kind of a bittersweet result, you know, coming back to competition. You had just finished a big expedition with Fernando Maciel, like whatever, a couple weeks beforehand, but I'm sure it's a race where you wanted to compete for a podium position again. You finished 8th. What was like the feeling like after that result about, you know, where you were physically and, you know, in the greater arc of your return to competition? Like, did you feel good about that result, or were you like doubting your ability to come back?
Yeah. You know, I think it was actually kind of a different feeling. Like I showed up there and I think had exactly the race that I was prepared for. And so if anything, it was like a lesson in humility and preparation for a big race like that. Like I had been super excited about the race, but then admittedly this project I had with Fernanda in Patagonia had taken the front seat and I was just all in on that. And I thought that I would be able to train pretty well while in Patagonia. And the reality is, like, with working on this project and everything we had going on there, I really did not get a lot of running in other than kind of some big, long adventure days to scout and recon that route. And then we also got COVID while we were there. And so I was, coming, like, I think I showed up really to TGC, like with like a 10-day training block, thinking like, okay, like, I know how to do this. My body knows how to do this. Let's just see what happens.
Just
and then, like,
for a miracle. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think looking back, like, of course, hoping for a miracle, but at the time I was like, oh, like, I don't know. Like, I've had races where I haven't been in top four and shown up and been able to just like pull together a smart race. Mm-hmm. And so I think, like, I just was kind of had my blinders on for that, and then showed up at TGC, and I didn't have any big expectations of, I didn't think I could run what I had run in previous years, but I thought I could have a pretty solid race. And I think pretty quickly on in that day, I just was like, okay, like, this is like, we're just in a different level right now, and that's okay. And so I think, like, coming out of that race and then just like really looking back at my training and like accepting that, like, okay, like, it's almost like, what did I think was going to happen? I think it was a really good lesson for that. And I'm like, I feel like I probably would have had to learn that lesson sooner or later. And I'm glad that happened then in that setting, in that race, especially before UTMB, because, then it kind of just like reset, like, okay, like, what are my goals at UTMB? What are my goals for other races in the season? And, like, especially if I want to have other projects and FKT adventures and that sort of thing in my schedule, how do I make sure that I can still like go after both goals without kind of letting one go to the side? And then if that happens, maybe like level setting my mindset a little bit before I go into that. Like, if I'd done that with TGC, I think it would have been like, okay, like, first race back, like, just get the distance done, just do it. And instead I kind of was like, oh, I don't know, I'll just see what happens. And like, you can't show up at a race like that without like really being in it,
This is great. Maybe talk about the balance between expedition and competition as a professional athlete. Of course, we just mentioned that you did this project with Fernando Maciel. In a minute, we're going to spend a lot of time talking about the North Cascades High Route, but maybe as we make our way towards that project, I'd love to hear you talk about how those two things are supportive of one another and how you think about them fitting together in the jigsaw puzzle of your calendar and the goals that you set for yourself. And maybe you could use the specific examples of what you did this year and how they fit with your competitive season.
Yeah. I think this will vary with everyone. I feel like for me personally, really what got me into ultra running and trail running in the first place was doing kind of big mountain days, mixing, mountaineering with ultra running and going fast and light and all that sort of thing. Like that's really like what got me stoked on the sport. And so I think I've found that I tend to have my best seasons and best races when I'm actually allowing myself to do that stuff too. And yeah, I think like that's just something that I try to remember as best as I can, and then find ways to make it work into my schedule. I don't think that if you look at my buildup for UTMB, I think like probably if people didn't know I was doing UTMB, they would just not even know I was racing it because of like doing like the high route and doing a bunch of recon trips and stuff like that. But I actually think that there is so much that can overlap with doing big, long days like that. And I think you definitely still need to do the race specificity in the training. But I think like the mindset and like the just physical strength you get from carrying a pack and doing like long continuous movement for, like at that point, like, it's, I'm out moving maybe for 20 hours or 15 hours, whatever it is during the day. So like jumping to then doing a, 20+ hour race setting, it's like that aspect of like moving continuously, moving through tiredness, eating the whole time, just getting your body used to that. Like that just comes really naturally. And then I, try to fit in like the things that those adventures don't cover for training, which is like some of the speed work or faster actual running,
Brilliant.
So yeah, I like to, I think like it keeps me fresh. And I think I get a lot of my like motivation and inspiration from doing big adventures like that. And I think that allows me to go into races that I care about, actually like fired up for the race rather than feeling like I've already sucked all that energy out for other races early in the year.
I love it. So let's come back to that in a sec. But first, tell us about the North Cascades High Route. How did you dream this thing up? And also maybe introduce us to Jenny, who is your partner during this week-long
expedition. Okay, I'll start with Jenny because she's amazing, deserves a shout out. So Jenny Abeg is total crusher in the Northwest. She's really well known in like the climbing and alpine community here. And I had
Is she a Seattleite?
She lives in Leavenworth. Currently.
Oh, okay.
But she grew up in this area, and she's kind of bounced around between Oregon and Washington and also British Columbia. But yeah, currently she's in Leavenworth, and we had like a number of friends kind of in mutual circles, but then the two of us had never met before. And I had heard her name just through seeing like big routes and stuff that she's done, but also have had people tell me like, oh, do you know Jenny? Like, I think you guys would get along. You might want to hang out sometime. And she, I guess, had heard the same thing about me, but I was, intimidated by her because she's like a real like climber, like real like alpine person. And apparently she had told me, she was like, oh, she was intimidated by me because like I'm like a runner. And like so we both like, I think kind of like complimented each other in ways that we felt like we're just like needed for this kind of route. So yeah. And then when we did eventually meet, which was specifically for this project, I had like basically cold called her up and was like, hey, I have this idea. I think you're a perfect partner. Like, and before I even finished, she's like, I'm in. Like, let's do it.
Wow.
So that led then to us going on what we called just like a blind adventure date, because you can't really like commit fully to doing some week-long route with just one person until you've actually at least like met in person. So she said yes, but we're like, okay, well, we should probably like, hang out in the mountains first. And we just instantly hit it off. I think we're really good partners, but then also became really fast friends. So that was, I think, one of the best things to come out of this whole project actually is just like getting a new mountain partner and really good friend out of it. So
Ryan said you guys did the run together yesterday too, right?
Yeah. So the run I did yesterday was like near Leavenworth. So her and her partner and some other friends were able to join kind of last minute. So
sweet.
Yeah. It's cool that she lives nearby so we can actually see each other. So the North Cascades High Route, I mean, that's something I had been planning and really thinking about for a couple of years, but then got real serious about it when I pitched it to North Face in 2021. So actually it was when I was right when I was injured, I put together this like pitch deck and sent that in, and that ended up like getting selected. So I got support for that. So it's like, at that point it was August. I'm like, okay, I guess like this project is just happening. Like, I've been thinking about it for a long time, but I was excited, but honestly, like a little bit like terrified because I wasn't quite sure. Like I wasn't 100% sure that the route that I had proposed would even go. And I didn't know that it would go in the time frame that I had kind of pitched to do this whole thing in like the course of a couple of days to a week. And, it's one thing saying that, and then it's another thing being like, oh, people actually like are like, this is a thing now. Like this is like, how do I actually pull this together?
Yeah.
And so just to kind of orient people for like what the route is, it's basically going across, like traversing across the length of North Cascades National Park. So that's in Washington State. It's a big national park, amazing, beautiful place, but really really inaccessible. There's only like 2 major road crossings. There are trails, but a lot, like I'd say most of the park is accessed off trail, just because of like how rugged the terrain is. It's pretty harsh terrain. And so there's not like a lot of really easy trails to get into it. And so the route in total is about 120 miles, but only about 20 miles is on trail. So yeah, about 100 miles off trail, 60,000 feet of elevation gain, which basically equates to like 1,000 feet per mile up and or down. Like every mile is like is 1,000 feet per mile average. So it's pretty intense.
I'll put the Strava in the show notes for people to take a look at it, because it's pretty heroic looking just from, the topographical perspective.
Yeah. Thanks. It is essentially a link up of like 4 existing traverses or high routes in the park. Although some, like the 2 on the end side are a lot more popular, and the 2 at the front half is just like, a little bit wild. And so each one of those routes takes usually like anywhere around a week. Some the northern sections, people spend more than a week, like would frequently go in and do one of them in like 10 days. Mm-hmm. And then some of the 2 sections on the lower end, that an average backpacker or mountaineer would maybe take 5 to 7 days. But then, there's runners that will go and do the last section of it in a day or 2. So it's a really long route, and our goal was to do it in under a week, which we did, but that was just like,
you barely made it under a week.
We barely made it under a week. Yeah. And actually, like it's arbitrary. It really doesn't matter, but like the making it under a week, like was like, okay, we can do that. Like, let's just make that happen. So yeah, I don't know. I think like stats aside, like it's just one of those things that I just was so all in on this project for basically the whole year. Like it became an obsession that I feel like it kind of needed to be that way, just because there was so much legwork that went into like researching the route and staring at maps and like digging up trip reports from the 90s about people who had last been in this section. And it was, I've never done anything like this before. And I feel like it's one of those things that, at least right now, like it stands out to me as probably like the biggest thing I've ever done, like as an athlete, which is kind of hard to put into perspective with like other races and stuff, because it's just so different. But I feel like I definitely like changed as an athlete in doing this route, and also like as a person too, which is maybe a little corny, but it's just like one of those life-changing weeks.
So to reinforce it for the listeners, it was not like a trail run. It was something that mixed a lot of different alpine and mountain skills, glacier travel, legit, scrambling or 5th class climbing, probably using crampons and ice axes and things like that.
Yep. We carried a rope, I think, the whole time, had harnesses on for the majority of it also. So,
yeah. So going back to Jenny, I was reading your post on fastestknowntime.com, and I just pulled out a little excerpt here that I want you to expand on. And what you said is, I've been scheming about this route for almost 3 years, and it's occupied the free space in my mind ever since. This trip was the culmination of a lifetime of mountain experience, perfectly weaving together skill sets of ultra endurance, mountain savvy, and technical alpine skills. Jenny and I found ourselves to be perfect partners. Skill set wise, we blended and supported each other perfectly, and our trust and communication was dialed. I'm so grateful for this week together. So talk about the importance of partnership on this type of expedition, and maybe also expand on that trust and communication part of the post, because it strikes me as important.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you pulled that out, and also like impressed that I wrote that, because it's like, wow, that's way more eloquent than what I just said. I mean, I think partnership is just so important for something like this. I mean, really, like the 2 of us were responsible for ourselves and each other's safety for the whole route. The first 4 days we did with just the 2 of us. We had, that's kind of a separate story, but had basically told the photographers that was supposed to be along, like to just meet us in the second half, because we wanted to have the experience of like just being out there with just the 2 of us. And in that section, that was like the cruxiest parts, where we were not even sure if we were going to like, there were so many unknowns really with what the conditions and everything would be like. And we also didn't see a single other human, or even, we saw a few animals, but like no humans or signs of humans or anything for that whole, 4 days. It was
Wow.
remote.
Wow.
And so I think like all of that, just like having a partner that you can just trust so inherently, is definitely like necessary to be safe, but also like to just in the style that we were doing this route and the way we were moving through, we didn't have a lot of room for error. And so, yeah, just, I think like I said, like when Jenny and I first went out on one of their like little blind date adventure missions, it just was like so natural and clicked in a way where like that day we had done also kind of like a mix of terrain and stuff. And so it was similar in a sense to like when we were on this high route, there's sections where, we're on a glacier for a couple hours. And, for the most part, that was something that like I would like kind of step into the leadership role on. I've done a lot of glacier travel and have a lot of experience with like steep snow travel and stuff. And so I would just kind of jump in there and then take that. And then, moments later, we'd get to some more alpine section with a little bit of rock climbing or scrambling or something. And Jenny would just naturally like float to the front in that. And I think one of the things that just really stood out to me is that we had different levels of expertise, but there was never a moment where like I didn't trust her when she was in front of me and she didn't trust me. But also like, I think sometimes when you're with someone who's more experienced in one thing, you can almost like disengage a little bit and like just really let that person take the lead. And like, maybe you don't feel like you're empowered as much to like really be a true partner in that setting. And I think sometimes that's okay. But one thing that just was so awesome about doing this with Jenny is I felt like really like brought along on the, like in the rock sections where she was leading, like I never felt like I was like, not competent enough or something. And like, in the same with, the snow traveler, the longer endurance stuff where like I was kind of taking the lead. And, by a couple of days in, I think we just both had leveled up in almost, it's like, we started a little bit like this or like this, and then just started to kind of like blend together. So, by a couple of days in, like she was moving faster on steeper snow, which maybe had been a little bit slower before. And like, I was climbing up something that I would have asked her to put a rope on before. And I think like, there's just this like really beautiful, like blend of trust and also like, I don't know, like encouragement and doing that in a way that's like safe and empowering, which is amazing.
Wow.
So
very, very cool. What about the communication aspect? I'm wondering if maybe there's a anecdote that you can point to where this was important. I'm sure over the course of 7 days, there was a lot of conversations, but like, maybe when you're thinking about where to put a rope on or whatever, like that's a place where you have to be like super honest. Are there any other communication examples that you think are valuable?
So one, there's like just so many, as you can imagine, like so many stories and like little things to share from this whole week. So I know we don't have time to do all these, but one thing that happened, so we were in the Pickets, which was basically the middle of this first section I talked about. We spent like 4-ish days completely alone. And it was also the most like the scariest terrain, I think, the most challenging. And I had gone out 2 weeks before and scouted that section. And Jenny was supposed to come, but Jenny had also gotten COVID right at the beginning of that trip, so then didn't come. So I was the only one who had seen that section. We had maps downloaded to our phones with like the route and everything that I had scouted. But then we had an issue with the charging cable. And so we had like backup batteries. Those batteries were fine, but then the phone charger, which we had only brought one of, like broke or something happened. We couldn't charge our phones. So we ended up with like dead phones and like, so no like map. And we didn't have a paper map backup, which was maybe a mistake that we should have had. But so suddenly now we're like in this, high consequence terrain that she's never seen before. I've seen, but like everything looks a little bit different because there's so much snow and the weather was different. And so it just changes. And, I think like, and we're realizing like, oh, we've got another day and a half to travel through all of these cruxes and we've got to go off of my memory. which was like a little, I'd never really done that before. And I think just like that happening is one of those times where it could really like escalate to being like a lot of tension between partners, especially when, like communication wise, like I might be like, oh, I think we need to go this way, but then she would see something different and maybe think she wants to go a different way. And we're just kind of trying to like talk about like how to do it. And I don't know, I think like being able to just freely communicate and like banter back and forth a little bit and like press each other without feeling like you're attacking someone on their decision or not trusting them, but really like talking through that, I think is, I don't know. I think we were able to just like have a really good and open dialogue, and it kept situations that could have been a lot more stressful just calm and like focused. And if we did make a mistake in navigation, then we would be like, oh, okay, let's talk about it, and then refocus, get back on track. And then that usually just was like it was never anything that like we like sat on and then held a grudge against or something. It just was smooth.
Very, very cool. So as we move towards the conversation about UTMB, I think maybe it'd be interesting to hear you just kind of reflect on where you are athletically right now, because I feel like you occupy a unique space in the sport. Like you sort of have a similar vibe to Kaytlyn, where are no pressure, not to put you in like,
oh my God, that's awesome.
A ridiculous category, but like, I don't know, like you, I'm wondering how you view yourself athletically, or just like as a pro athlete right now with, obviously being a professional trail runner and competing on the, international circuit in that discipline, but also as somebody who has these other sort of like multi-sport ambitions. Yeah. Anything there that you sort of meditate on or consider in moments of reflection?
Yeah. I think like this year was a really good example for me of like the things that bring me a lot of joy in the sport, and also things that I just like really want to lean into more. I think like you said, like doing these kind of mixed discipline things, like fortunately, that's one of the reasons why I really, really love the North Face and wanted to join on the team with them, is I think like there is a lot of space and support for these types of adventures. And I think moving forward, I'd love to find a way to continue to kind of intertwine these like big mixed travel types of routes, where like the endurance, like the mountain 100 side of what I like doing in races is something I can bring to, mountaineering and the alpine, and also, continuing to develop that skill set so that I could push things in a different way. And it's a small, kind of like niche area, but I think it's growing so quickly. And I feel like I would love to be on the leading edge of that and really pushing that forward. And I think this high route was a really great way to start doing that. I think right now it's not like, I don't know, the high route, an example, I think it's just like, I don't think a lot of people like get really what the route was. Right.
And that's why I wanted
can't really understand like what Jenny and I experienced out there. And I almost, it's not like you can't understand unless you're there. I think like over time, as people start to do this route or pieces of the route or other routes that I might want to do in the future, I think it'll start to be more impactful. And I feel like it's just cool to think about how this type of route maybe is something that like 10, 20 years from now is actually going to be a really big deal, even if right now it's kind of like something that we're holding a little bit close, and I'm not trying to be presumptuous about it, but I just think like doing things like this is something that I'm really passionate about. And I think also could blend really well with my desire to race big mountain hundreds. And I would love to try to find some ways to like continue to intertwine that in my seasons moving forward.
Well, it's going to take some cool storytelling. And so maybe to wind down this conversation, it looked like Ethan Newberry's working on a movie about the whole expedition.
Yes.
I'm sure will help to, sort of, accomplish your goal of, being on the leading edge of bringing all these multiple disciplines of mountain travel together and reimagining the way we look at maps to combine all these different fun outdoor adventurous activities. When can we expect the movie?
It's not going to be until the spring, so you're going to have to stay tuned.
Come on, Ethan, let's go, bro.
Okay. Ethan Newberry is working on it, and we had two amazing photographers and videographers. So Nick Danielson, who I'm sure you know, and then Stephen Nam, who also is an amazing photographer and lives. Yeah, they both were local, so that was fun because they'd seen the route before.
I can't wait to see it. I'll text Ethan and tell him to
hurry it up. Yeah. I haven't seen it either. So I'm like getting anxious to see a teaser or something.
Cool. All right. Well, so let's talk about UTMB because obviously I want to spend plenty of time on this too. Of course, you finished third place, a fantastic podium performance at your first UTMB. I know it was a race that you've been waiting to do patiently.
Yeah, I have.
But maybe to just kind of execute the seamless transition between these two topics, you did the High Route in July, only like a month before race day. So I guess going back to the conversation earlier about balancing expedition and competition, maybe just paint the picture of what it was like in that month in between the recovery from that week-long expedition and where your confidence was at, sort of like coming back to UTMB or like that level of competition after such a big expedition.
Yeah. So, full disclosure, I had actually set out to try to do the High Route at the end of June or early July, but we just had a mega snowpack in the Cascades. And so things kind of kept getting pushed back. I mentioned that my partner Jenny got COVID early July. And so that continued to push things back. And so we really got down to the wire of the last possible weekend that I would have felt comfortable starting it. And I think, to tie this back to what we talked about with Trans-Gran Canaria earlier in the year and the Patagonia trip, and it was almost like a repeat. It's big expedition, COVID, and big race all happening. So I was definitely aware of that and just, nervous that I didn't want it to get too close because I wanted to make sure I had enough time to recover and also switch mindset into UTMB. And so after the High Route, I think I took a full week off and then had, I believe, maybe 2 weeks of training. So I did a peak week of training back in Washington and actually went down and ran on the Wonderland Trail for a couple of days, which was awesome. And I just love that place. And I feel like the terrain really vibes well with what you'd find on Mont Blanc.
Great place to train for UTMB. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so I really just tried to, tried to move on from the High Route in a way that allowed me to still celebrate this massive thing that I was super proud of, but then also know okay, I've got to do UTMB. I can't really put my heart and energy into UTMB if I'm still really focusing on what I just did.
Yep.
So that it was, I think ideally I would have liked to have a little bit more time in between just to process that a bit more. Cause I feel like a lot of that now is I'm kind of going back to actually having some time to process what happened both at UTMB and in the High Route. And so it would have been nice to have a little more time, but ultimately, got in the peak training and then went out to Courmayeur with my husband, Ellie, and we spent, I think, 10 days or so in Courmayeur and kind of wrapped up a little bit of training, started my taper, and then went over to Chamonix for race week. So tight turnaround.
Were you feeling ready for it? When you flip the switch from expedition to competition, but also coming back from injury and the last big race that you did was Trans-Gran Canaria, where you finished 8th, a solid performance, but certainly a performance that you would have wanted more from.
Yep.
Here you are at UTMB, a race that I think you're going to win someday personally, but you're, I'm just wondering like where your mindset was at in terms of like confidence and preparation for, the world's most important race.
Yeah. Since you mentioned Trans-Gran Canaria, I mean, I was definitely in my head about that before the race. And Ellie actually he saw that, he saw right through it. He's like, just go look at your training that you did for Trans-Gran Canaria. Like, look at what you did leading up to that and look at where you're at for UTMB. And you will see that you're not even in the same ball game. Like, you didn't train for Trans-Gran Canaria. Like, and it wasn't until I actually sat down and went through and looked up what I did week by week. And I was that actually allowed me to kind of step out of my head in that and just be like, okay, yeah, this is I'm not, I can't compare these two because it's hard. And also I hadn't raced 100 miles since, the Wonderland Trail, which is a little short of 100, is the last thing that I had done even in that distance.
Yeah.
And then I guess before that, what did I even do? Western States, my third year racing 2019, which I did not have a great race at. I was sick. And, I actually had a great race given everything, but it wasn't my best performance there. So I kind of went out on my third year there feeling ooh, that wasn't my best day. And so, I don't know. I think that was definitely a little bit hard mentally, but I don't know what it is.
Did you have an intuition that you were ready for a podium though? Because
I kind of did actually.
I did something that I've asked Katie Scheid and Matthew Blanchard on the show recently too. And I was curious, because I think sometimes that intuition can get foggy when we doubt ourselves and stuff.
Yeah. I did. And I think what really helped me with that or channel that was just trying to remember that the training that I've done for UTMB wasn't just what I did in the last 2 or 3 months. I was trying to think of all these other hundreds that I've run as being build up for UTMB. And that I think I just I was able to stay pretty calm and chill before race week. And I did that on purpose. I just kind of removed myself from the buzz of everything. I just stayed in the apartment, didn't meet up with people, didn't go for runs, just really shut things down. Yeah. And then I feel when I got to the starting line, I had expected to just be so much more nervous. And I don't know, I just had this really calm sense of I know how to do this. I've been wanting to come and race here forever. And now I'm finally here. And I was nervous actually about the first 20, 26, 24, whatever, recently to Lake Contamines. I was worried about that first part because I knew it was just going to be really fast for me. But I was just trying to tell myself, just get to Lake Contamines, pull out your headlamp, get into the mountains and just try to remember, I know what to do once I get there. Yeah. But a lot of that was just kind of trusting that the years I had before would come around. But it's hard to do that when it's been 2 years since you've raced or, done anything really like that, because the first instinct is oh, I don't know if my body knows how to do that anymore, or I don't know if I'm fit enough to do that anymore. So it's just a different way to come back into a big race.
So then talking more about the race itself, eventually you I think you referred to it as no woman's land, where Katie and Marianne Hogan were sort of off the front and you had firmly established yourself in third place. But maybe anything from the race, any details from their performance that you think are really memorable or lessons learned for your next attempt on the course?
Yeah. I think one of my big pacing strategies for the race was to try to get to Courmayeur within the time goals that I had set, but also feeling fresh, which I didn't honestly know if was even possible, but I did. I came in there and I'm okay, I'm right in between, not as fast as I thought I might come in, but it really I'm basically between, right in my range. But I'm I feel good. I'm not sure how I managed this, but I feel good. And then I left there in third and then just, turned on the gas a little bit and ran that next section really well. And like that's when I then learned that I was kind of in this no man's land. So basically from Courmayeur until the finish, I leapfrogged a bit with a few men, but it really didn't see many people out there. It was pretty lonely. So I think like, I'm really proud of, with it being, especially being my first race at UTMB and being, really 3 years since I last ran 100 with COVID and with being injured. I'm really proud of like pulling that first half together and just like running fresh and being able to just like go from there. Like, I feel like that's like awesome. And I'm going to try to replicate that again. But I think lessons for next year is just like, I think I definitely raced a conservative race for me. And that brought me a podium and I'm stoked about that. But I think sometimes maybe I need to take be a little bit riskier with the pacing with people and not let, like, by the time I, was ready to make moves, Katie and Marianne had already just had so much time on me that, had I had people closer, maybe I would have pushed a little bit more, but I was just kind of in this like place where, well, like I've got 50 miles left. I've got a pretty secure third, but that's a lot of time. Like, should I push or should I just like chill out and not do anything stupid and just like keep an eye on where things are at? And that's what I ended up doing. So I feel like I executed that really well, but I think wanting to go a little bit harder off the front might be in my future. Yeah.
You got to take big risks, I think, to win that race, but plenty more opportunities. Was there a big sigh of relief at the finish line, having, put together another fantastic, like competitive performance after injury?
Not immediately, but in the days after, I think this came from like a few friends just like messaging me about it and being like, wow, like, so great to see you back after injury. And I'm just like, I really hadn't thought about that much before. But I think then afterwards, just thinking like I felt really strong racing. And I think, regardless of performance, I think like covering that much distance and elevation gain and just like feeling like I could do that and like was feeling really good. I feel like it's like a great reminder that like, I'm like the injuries is past me. I'm like no longer injured and also just like ready to rip again.
Yeah. Somebody pointed out to me, I can't remember who it was. I wish I could give them the proper credit, but of the podium finishers at UTMB this year, yourself, Marianne Hogan, and Tom Evans had all been through like serious injury and recovery in the last couple years, call it. It was like Marianne had broken her leg and Tom had gotten knee surgery, yourself with your stress fracture. So anyway, I just thought it was a good reminder to all of us that, in the moments of doubt of like, oh, I'm never going to be the same athlete again, my career's over, et cetera, that you can still battle back and achieve podium performances like half of the podium finishers at UTMB this year. So
totally. Yeah. I think when you're in the depths of injury, in like, I've had so many people told me like, oh, don't worry, you'll come back stronger. And like, you really get sick of hearing that because, I like, don't really want to say that to other people because I know everyone's experience is different, but I think like it takes time and a lot of hard work, but like you'll come back as a different athlete. And there's a good chance that like, if you do that right, it's going to be better than where you started.
All right. So now briefly tell us about the next ultramarathon you did, which was crewing your husband, Elliot. We don't have enough time to go through the entire, whatever it was, several day story, but I'd love to hear.
So this is actually like, we just were so fortunate to get to spend like so much time out there. And because he was racing, I think it was 2 weeks after UTMB, we just stayed through. And so we went back over to Courmayeur, stayed there. So this was his second time at Tour de France. He raced last year. The week started off great. Like he was super stoked about it, super well trained. Actually he decided to stop, so he ended up not finishing, but decided to stop I think one day in, and everything was fine. Like, wasn't injured. He just like, I don't know. I'm actually really, really proud of him for it, because I feel like so often we think of like a DNF as just being like this thing to avoid at all costs. And like this, black mark of something that like, oh, I didn't get this thing done. But he just wasn't, I don't know. I don't want to like speak for him, but like just decided like this wasn't his year. It wasn't what he needed right now. I think tour is one of those beasts of an event that just really like takes so much out of you, like physically and mentally. And for a lot of reasons, he just decided that wasn't what he needed this year. So we ended up then getting a bonus week because the race is a week long. So we just had like an actual vacation because he had already taken off of work and went down to the beach, like did some, ate some good food, drank some good wine, like swam in the ocean. Like it was, I don't know, it was a great way to finish the trip. I think he's got the fire for next year if he gets in again. So,
oh God. Yeah. I mean, that makes DNFing quite dangerous when, instead of the shame and disappointment of dropping out and then having to return home, like feeling like you've really, sort of let yourself down. Instead, you have a week-long vacation when you're swimming in the ocean.
I know.
It's like all of a sudden it's like, man, DNF sounds pretty darn nice.
I know. Well, and when like, I think he had stopped on Monday and on, there's so many complex feelings around it. So like, even though he was having a good time, I know he was like processing that, but like, by the end of the week, like I think it was on Friday, he's like, wow, I don't know. I kind of wish I'd kept going. And I'd be like, Ellie, like that would mean you are literally still out there. Like you would still be out there. Like we have relocated. We've like think of all these things we've done in the last week. You would have been doing the same thing. Like it's okay.
He's already finished the damn race. And wasn't there like some kind of weather stoppage this year anyway?
Yeah.
So they made the right call.
It snowed. It got real cold and snowed actually a lot. So they had paused people. I think a majority of people who are on course were able to still continue, but yeah, they pulled people, I think, at one of the high coals on the last day.
Good call, Ellie. Good call. Yeah. Maybe I'll come help crew for him next year with you.
All right, good. You're on the hook. I've had so many people tell me they want to, and then no one can commit. So you're in.
I'll come. We'll do good cop, bad cop, and we'll make sure he finishes it up again. So winding down, let's look ahead. You and I talked a few weeks ago, and you were trying to get some bait on Diagonal Day Food, the Grand Raid. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let you into the race. But when one door closed, another one opened, and it sounds like you are now excited about a forthcoming trip to Thailand. So maybe tell us about how that came together and how you're feeling about the mountain running championships.
Yeah, so I got selected through like resume application for the 80K trail team for the World Championships in Thailand. So that's in about 3 weeks, and yeah, I'm super excited. I raced with the team in 2018 when it was in Spain, and that's still been like one of the highlights of like my running experiences. I feel like just racing with teammates and like being in that environment was just super fun. And so I've been excited to be able to go back and get a chance to do that again. So we've got a great team. I think it's going to be really hot, and I don't know a ton about like the trails. So I think it'll be a little bit of a wild adventure, but this is actually. I was
trying to find any information about the course also. Have they published that at all?
There's a low resolution map that I have tried to like line up with like a map that I can like map out, but not yet, but hopefully like they're just kind of starting to send out some more information. So hopefully everything comes together, but I think everyone's probably in the same boat unless they live out there already. So it'll be an adventure.
Team USA is coming in strong there to Chiang Mai, Thailand.
Yeah.
And, I think you had a really interesting element to the team. Maybe quickly tell us about how you're thinking about training. I didn't realize it's only 3 weeks from now, and turning around from a 7-day adventure in the North Cascades and then whatever it was, 24, 25 hours at UTMB. This is going to be a different beast altogether.
It is.
How are you thinking about preparation and, like course specificity and things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I'm trying to, I feel like it's always hard. At least I've always had a hard time like translating the super long mountain kind of 100 type work into then like something fast. I think one thing that's really intriguing about this course is that there's like 15 or 16,000 feet of elevation gain on it. So it's like stats wise about half of UTMB. So I think like that aspect of it, I think I'm really excited about, because even if it's a fast race, it's still going to be, I think, a lot of hiking in that. So I don't know, just trying to get a little bit more focus on some speed work and quality miles, not doing quite as much like big volume, and getting in the sauna to heat train as much as I can. Yeah,
I feel like it's going to be quite muggy.
Yeah, bro. It's been like 80, like I have it on the weather app, and it's been like mid 80s or warmer every single day there.
Yeah.
So I think
bring those salt pills.
Yeah, totally.
Well, maybe last question, looking further ahead, and good luck coming up here with Team USA. We'll all be rooting for you guys. Looking further ahead, I'm sure this winter you've got lots of plans to chill out and do some skiing and stuff, but what are you thinking about for 2023, both competitively, and are there any other massive dream expeditions that you want to speak about publicly at the moment? Yeah, I don't even have a massive dream expedition to share, but I know I want to do one. I think this one, the North Cascades High Route, just took really like a full year of planning almost to pull together. So I think I'm thinking about like, maybe I won't do a big one like that next year, but I'd love to start kind of putting in the work to figure out what that would look like for the following year. So yeah, at this point, planning to go back to UTMB. I think that'll be my big focus. And then I'd love to have a few other races kind of on my mind, but nothing set in stone yet. So I think just kind of keeping an open mind and trying to figure out some fun adventure stuff. And I think one thing I will try to make sure I do next year is just not over race. I think it was really nice to have like two big things that were my focus, this summer, and staying fresh and stuff for UTMB, I think would be something I want to do next year too. Yeah, brilliant. Well, KG, it's great to catch up. Thanks for coming back on the podcast. Yeah. Hey, thanks for having me.